This happened back in the summer of 2017. I had just gotten laid off from my first decent job out of college. It was a writing position at a small local firm out in the suburbs near Cleveland. The job wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and gave me a little hope that I was finally getting somewhere in life. Getting let go felt like the rug had been yanked out from under me, but I tried to stay positive. I lived in a mid-sized city on the southern edge of Lake Erie, just a few blocks from the shoreline. My girlfriend Julia and I shared a tiny one-bedroom apartment with our two completely spoiled cats who ruled the place like little dictators. We didn't make much. Julia worked at this old-school chocolate shop downtown, and I was trying to scrape together delivery gigs to keep us afloat, but we got by. We even managed the occasional splurge on takeout or a cheap movie night. One muggy afternoon, about a week after the layoff, I decided to clear my head. I drove out to this quiet circular parking spot near Edgewater Park, a hidden little overlook, just off the main drag. It was one of my favorite thinking spots, the kind of place where you could sit in your car, listen to the waves slap against the rocks, and feel like the world slowed down a bit. I leaned the seat back and half-watched the commie hearings on my phone, trying to feel productive while flipping between job listings and checking Twitter. It was mindless, but calming. Just as I was about to leave, a light blue Hyundai pulled into the lot. At first I didn't think much of it. It was just another car, right? But when I glanced over, I saw the driver, middle-aged guy, kind of rough-looking, and he was just staring at me. I don't mean a casual glance. I mean full-on, unblinking eye contact, the kind that prickles the back of your neck. I gave him a quick nod, one of those awkward "hey, I see you" gestures, and looked away, but he didn't stop. He kept staring. No expression, no movement, just locked in. I tried to shrug it off. Maybe he was having a moment. Maybe I reminded him of someone. Still, the vibe was off enough that I decided it was time to go. I backed out of a lot and started driving home, taking Lakeshore Boulevard toward downtown. A few minutes later, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The Hyundai was behind me again. I told myself it was just a coincidence. He probably just happened to be heading in the same direction. But I turned down a random side street just to be sure. Something completely out of the way. He followed. I turned again, slower this time. Trying not to be obvious, he followed that. Turned. I kept doing it 3 more turns, all random, all off any logical route to downtown. And every single time I looked in the mirror, there he was. Always 2 or 3 car lengths behind, never speeding, never tailgating, just tracking me. The kind of slow, deliberate pace that tells you this wasn't an accident. My heart started pounding. I wasn't in a bad neighborhood, but it wasn't somewhere I wanted to stop and confront a stranger either, especially not one who stared like that. I grabbed my phone and sent Julia a quick text. "Hey, think I'm being followed. Guy in a blue Hyundai, can you stay by your phone?" No response. She was probably working. My hands were starting to sweat. I passed a gas station and considered pulling in, but it was mostly empty. No real safety in numbers, so I kept driving. Then, I remembered a trick I'd read online, a way to check if someone was really tailing you. I took 4 quick right turns, basically making a square block. No one does that unless they're looping on purpose. Then sure enough, the Hyundai was still there. That's when it hit me. This guy wasn't just following me, he was hunting me. Now, I'm not exactly built like The Rock. I can hold my own if I have to, but I'm not about to throw myself into a situation that could spiral out of control. So, I decided to play it smart. I pulled into a Speedway gas station just off the highway, plenty of lights, cameras, and people around. If this guy followed me in, I'd know for sure that it wasn't just paranoia. Sure enough, he did. He rolled in right after me and pulled up to the pump next to mine. That confirmed it. I cracked my driver's side window just a few inches, enough to talk but not enough to be vulnerable. I leaned slightly toward him and called, trying to sound calm. "Hey man, you need something? You've been behind me for like 20 minutes. He turned toward me slowly. His face looked hollow, like someone who hadn't slept in days. Deep bags under his eyes, skin that looked a little too pale, almost gray. His mouth hung slightly open, but no words came out for a second. Then, in this dry, almost whispering voice, he said, "No, you're not her." And before I could even react, he slammed on the gas. Tires shrieked against the pavement. The Hyundai jolted forward and tore out of the station like a bat out of hell. I sat there stunned, not scared, not exactly, more like shaken and confused. What the hell had that even meant? "You're not her." It chilled me in a way I couldn't explain. Like I had accidentally stepped into someone else's nightmare. I called the non-emergency police line once I'd caught my breath. They told me to meet a park officer back at the original lot where it all started. It felt a little surreal driving back there, like I was stuck in some weird loop. I waited in my car, scrolling through my phone, trying not to obsess over every weird thing that had just happened. Then I saw it, that same sky blue Hyundai roll through the lot. He didn't stop, just did a slow, calculated circle like he was scoping it out, then pulled away. I pointed it out the second the officer pulled up. To their credit, they reacted fast. They managed to stop him just a couple blocks away. I sat in the car and waited, watching flashing lights reflect off the trees while the cop talked to the guy. After about 10 minutes, the officer walked back over to me. He looked unsettled, said the guy told them I was the one acting suspicious, that he thought I was a threat somehow. The officer rolled his eyes a little, clearly not buying it, but then he added something that made my stomach drop. "We're familiar with him," he said quietly. "He's had issues before." He didn't go into detail. All I know is that by the end of it, the guy was apparently shaking. He offered to apologize and practically begged the officer to escort him home. They did. Was officially banned from the park. Julia and I figured that would be the end of it. But around 2 a.m. that night, we were out on our third-floor balcony that night, just unwinding with a couple beers and cigarettes, trying to shake off everything that had happened earlier. The air was humid but calm. Streetlights cast long shadows on the pavement below. Everything felt still. Then I noticed a car, parked about half a block down, engine still running, headlights off. I leaned forward in my chair, squinting just enough to make out the shape of the vehicle. It was hard to be sure from that distance, but I swear it looked exactly like the same Hyundai from before. Julia had already heard the whole story by then, so when I gestured subtly toward the street, she caught on fast. No words needed. I pulled out my phone, opened the Notes app and checked the partial license plate I had written down. It matched every single character. I called the police, again my voice lower, this time tense. I gave them the details while keeping my eyes on the car, and as I was talking to dispatch, the Hyundai slowly pulled away like it had been watching and knew the call was happening. A couple patrol cars rolled through about 10 minutes later, but by then the street was empty, quiet, like it had never been there at all. We didn't sleep much that night. Every window in that apartment got locked, double-checked and checked again. Same with the doors. We even pushed furniture up against the inside of the front door just for peace of mind. Nothing happened that night. No sounds, no visits. Weeks passed, and eventually we let ourselves move on at least a little. The world kept turning. Rent had to be paid. Life had to be lived. Then came another random night. Julia and I were heading to the nearby gas station on Detroit Avenue for late-night snacks and drinks. One of those silly, harmless little trips we used to love. She stayed in the car while I ran inside. When I came back out, I stopped cold, parked just one row over just a few feet from her passenger side. Window was that same goddamn Hyundai. And this time, he wasn't watching me. He was staring straight at her, unblinking like a statue behind the wheel. I locked eyes with him for just a second to make sure he saw me, to let him know I saw him, but he didn't move, didn't blink, just kept staring at Julia with that same dead, tired expression from before. I slid into the driver's seat and told her, quietly, "It's him again." We pulled out of the lot and took a bunch of random turns, loops, detours, trying to see if he'd follow. He didn't that time, or if he did, he vanished again before we could be sure. We called the cops once more, but same story, they couldn't track him down. Later that week we heard back from one of the park rangers, the guy who'd met me that first day. He told us something that chilled me to the bone. Apparently, this guy had a habit. He'd been reported for following women in and around the park. Always women with headphones on. Jogging alone, walking near the trails. He never touched anyone, but he was always watching. And Julia, she fit his type. The ranger said my incident had been the last straw. That's why they officially banned him. That's why they escorted him home. But the final piece didn't click until much later. We realized he must have seen Julia in my car that first day, maybe just for a moment. Maybe she was leaning forward, fixing her hair, or laughing at something I said. But that brief glimpse, it was enough. He thought she was someone else, and then he started following me, thinking I was her. This happened back in 2008, when I was taking night classes at a small career college in Portland, Oregon. The place was just a few blocks from the east side of the Burnside Bridge, not too far from downtown. One evening, I showed up to class way too early, like nearly 40 minutes before it started. I didn't feel like sitting in the lobby awkwardly, so I figured I'd kill some time and take a walk. It was early fall, cool and cloudy, that perfect mix of moody and quiet. I had a small joint in my jacket pocket, just enough to unwind a bit. So I thought, why not? There's a trail behind the college that leads down past some train tracks and eventually winds through Laurelhurst Park, a well-known spot in the city. Great views, lots of trees, and always just a little eerie once the sun starts to dip. I veered off the main trail and followed a narrow dirt path into the trees, where it felt a little more private. Found a nice little clearing off the path, hidden by brush, and lit up a few puffs in. I felt that calm start to set in, until I heard footsteps behind me. Coming down the same trail was an older man, maybe late 50s or early 60s. He wore a windbreaker and carried a small white grocery bag in one hand. He gave me a quick nod and a faint smile as he passed. I smiled back out of habit. I was one of those be nice to everyone types, especially if they seemed harmless. But as he got closer, something felt wrong. There was no clear reason. Just this subtle shift in the air, like a gut instinct flicking a switch, so I stood up casually and walked off in the other direction, pretending like I was just moving to another spot. No big deal. I figured I was being overly cautious, paranoid maybe. The joint probably wasn't helping, but after a few turns through random side trails I glanced back, and he was still behind me, not close enough to be right on top of me, but always just far enough to seem like he wasn't following until you really paid attention. I even tested it. I looped in a full circle, like literally walked in a weird, pointless loop just to see if he'd keep going his own way. He didn't. He followed the loop exactly. That's when the fear really started to creep in. I began to notice he was fidgeting with the grocery bag more and more, like something inside it was either heavy or sharp. It wasn't subtle. His hand would dip into it, fingers fumbling around like he was gripping something tight, then pulling it back out again. He kept looking down, then up at me, then back into the bag. Over and over, I picked up my pace. Still, he matched it. No matter how fast or slow I walked, he kept the same distance, never gaining, never falling behind, like he wanted me to know he was there, but not enough to make a scene. By then, the trail was starting to feel like a trap. Trees on both sides, no one else around. Just the sounds of leaves underfoot and the distant rush of cars on the highway. Muffled and useless. My heart was hammering in my chest. I wasn't sure what to do, if I should call someone or just run, but I didn't want to turn my back on him completely. So I ducked off the trail again, this time toward a small side street I remembered from previous walks. My hope was that I'd get back into open space somewhere, with lights and people. But he followed again. Even when I crossed into the residential blocks, lined with porches and flickering porch lights, he kept coming. At that point I bolted. Full sprint, no warning, just ran. I didn't look back for several blocks. When I finally did, he was gone. He kept fiddling with the grocery bag, not like someone casually carrying it, more like he was trying to keep something hidden but still within reach, like whatever was inside, he wanted it ready just in case. At this point, I wasn't even high anymore. I was fully alert. On edge, I decided to head back toward the main trail. At least there were other people around, cyclists, dog walkers, the usual early evening park crowd. It was still summer, the sun just starting to dip, but the light was good enough that I figured I was safe in numbers. And yet he was still behind me now. He was pretending to be interested in random things, stopping to look at flowers, tying his shoe, stretching, obvious weird stuff, like he was trying to act natural and failing miserably. That was my cue to dip. I cut off the main trail again and walked deeper into the park toward the denser, quieter section, just to finish the joint and try to chill out. But I couldn't shake the feeling, like I was being watched from every angle, even when I couldn't see him. I felt him, and that's when the fear started getting tangled up with confusion. Because here's the thing, I was 18, I wasn't exactly an easy target. I was built, covered in tattoos, combat boots, punk jacket, piercings, not someone a typical creep would single out, especially when there were plenty of other people, women walking alone with headphones in. Why me? Was he a cop, some private security guy, or just a lunatic with a strange fixation? I started heading back toward the school. And then I spotted him again, still trailing me, not hiding, not even trying to disguise it anymore. I picked up my pace, so did he. I slowed down. He slowed to. At one point I stopped to tighten my boots in case things went south and I needed to run or throw hands. He stopped too, didn't pretend to check his phone, didn't stretch this time, just stood there, watching. By the time I reached the small pedestrian bridge that cut back behind the school, my heart was pounding. Then I spotted two joggers, maybe in their 20s, catching their breath near the rail. I made a split-second decision. I walked straight up to them, kept my voice low, and said, "Hey, can you guys pretend you know me? I think I'm being followed." They didn't hesitate. They played along instantly, smiling like we were old friends and asking how I'd been. That was enough. The guy finally broke his pattern. He glanced over, hesitated, then quietly ducked into the trees. Didn't say anything, didn't make eye contact, just vanished into the woods. I thanked the joggers, kept my cool, and kept walking like everything was fine. I figured that was it. Crisis averted. I made it maybe 100 yards down the path behind the school. Nothing. I looked back a couple of times, but he was gone. Eventually I popped in my earbuds, hit shuffle, and let the music drown everything out. Started to relax. Started to believe it was over. Then my phone rang. It was my girlfriend. The music cut off, and that's when everything took a turn. That's when I heard them. Quick footsteps behind me, fast and light, almost like someone jogging just to close the gap. I spun around, and there he was, the same guy, no more than 5 feet away. He had somehow caught up that fast without making a sound. Not a single warning crunch on the gravel, not a rustle in the leaves, just sudden movement and those dead, tired eyes. My blood ran cold. I didn't say a word. I just bolted up the steps behind the school building toward the student lot, where I saw one of my classmates standing near the doors. Warren, he was chatting with someone, just killing time before class. I didn't even say hi. Dropped my bag and jacket right on the ground next to him and got ready to throw down if it came to that. The guy walked past us slowly, heading toward the main road like he wasn't doing anything wrong, but he never took his eyes off me. Then, out of nowhere, he turned around, walked right back, stopped just a few feet away, and stared. That smile he gave me, I still feel sick thinking about it. It wasn't friendly, it wasn't nervous, it was the kind of smile that says, "You got lucky." His hand was deep inside that same white grocery bag, knuckles tensed around something. He didn't say a word. Then, just like that, he turned and disappeared around the side of the school building. I reported everything to the front office, described him in full, told them the exact time and trail. I didn't know if he'd come back and target someone else, but I wasn't about to leave that to chance. When I told my mom about it that night, trying to laugh it off, she just shook her head. Then she made this dark joke, her version of comfort. I guess, Jeffrey Dahmer had a thing for young fit guys too. Didn't help I didn't see the man again. Not that night. Not for a while. But about 2 weeks later, I was flipping through the local Portland paper, just killing time in a coffee shop, when I saw his face again. Front page of the crime section. Same guy. Same eyes. He'd been arrested for public indecency. That wasn't even the worst part. He was caught masturbating on the subway, while holding a woman at knife point. The article said he'd followed her onto the train, cornered her in one of the empty cars. Thankfully, someone pulled the emergency stop and transit police got there in time. But here's what made my stomach flip. He was wearing the exact same shirt in the mugshot, the same one he'd been wearing when he followed me. I stared at that photo for a long time. And even now, all these years later, I still get that cold, crawling fear in my gut whenever I think about it. See, I've always had this weird phobia, something between scopophobia and ophthalmophobia, the fear of being watched. And ever since that night, it's only gotten worse. Sometimes I'll glance at a window after dark and feel like there's someone behind it, or I'll pass a door left slightly cracked open and just know that if I looked hard enough into the dark, I'd see eyes looking back. There's this thing my brain does when I'm in a dark room or near a weird corner. Even if I know nothing's there, my mind fills in the blanks with the worst possible thing, like a face, just quietly staring back at me from the shadows. I don't know why it happens, but after what I went through, I do know where it started. It was the summer of 2016. I was living in a small but cozy one-floor apartment with my mom in a quiet little neighborhood just outside of Tacoma, Washington. Nothing fancy, no attic, no basement. Just a simple rental with creaky floors and thin walls. My bedroom had a closet at the far end. Inside that closet was this weird square-shaped door on the floor. A crawl space, the kind you don't think twice about unless you've seen a few too many horror movies. I never opened it, ever. Most people might have gotten curious eventually, but not me. From day one, I had the same thought. There's either something dead down there, or something waiting. And I wasn't about to find out which. For a while, everything was fine. Just regular life. My mom worked late shifts at a diner down the street. I was finishing up my final year of high school, spending most nights gaming or scrolling endlessly on my phone until I passed out. Nothing felt off. At least not at first. Then, maybe a month or two after we moved in, I started hearing noises at night. Nothing loud. Just little things like soft scratching, or a dull thump coming from inside the walls. Sometimes it sounded like it was behind my bed. Other times behind the closet. I told my mom. She laughed it off, said, "It's probably rats," and kept flipping through her TV shows like it was no big deal. Honestly, I kind of agreed as long as they stayed inside the walls and didn't show up in my room. I figured we could just coexist, but that wasn't how it played out. Eventually, the sounds just faded into the background. They became part of the house, like the creaks in the floorboards or the hum of the fridge. I even found them kind of comforting in a weird way. Like if the noises were still there, then everything was normal. That changed on a Tuesday night. It was around 3 a.m. when I woke up to this soft rolling sound, barely audible but distinct. It sounded exactly like the closet door sliding open, the one in my room. That awful little door with the crawl space underneath it. At first, I thought I was dreaming. I squinted through the dark, trying to adjust my eyes. The moonlight coming through the blinds wasn't enough to make anything out clearly. Maybe I saw movement. Maybe I didn't. I told myself I was imagining it. Just a bad dream, maybe the house settling. But something inside me knew. My chest felt tight, my ears were ringing. My body was tense in that very specific way that only happens when you know something's wrong. So I turned on my bedside lamp, and I swear to God I still get chills when I think about what I saw. I expected to see coats, maybe an old shoe, a storage bin, anything normal. But what I saw, it was an eye, a human eye. Not just the eye half of a man's face, peeking through the crack of the slightly open closet door, just barely visible. Skin pale and expressionless. The eyeball unmoving. He wasn't scared, he wasn't flinching, he was just watching me. Dead still, focused, like he'd been doing it for a long time. I couldn't scream. I couldn't even breathe. Right. My body just locked up. Every muscle froze like I'd been flash frozen in place. I think I started crying, silently, without even knowing I was doing it. I tried to say something, maybe ask who he was. what he wanted, but the words didn't come out. They stumbled and died in my throat, and then ... He opened the door wider, just a few inches, slowly, smoothly. I saw the rest of him, and I won't describe it, not because I'm scared, but because I've spent years trying to forget that face, and putting it into words would only bring it back. But then he did something worse. He whispered she. That was it, just one sound, but it made it real. No more wondering if I was dreaming. No more excuses. I tore myself out of bed and sprinted down the hall barefoot, sobbing, and crashed into my mom's bedroom door. I couldn't even form full sentences, just gasping, shaking, trying to speak. She was half asleep, confused, but the second she saw my face, she reached for the phone and called the cops. They got there fast, but by the time they arrived, he was gone. He vanished, just gone. But the crawl space in my closet, it was still open. I wouldn't go near it, but the cops checked it out. One of them came back into the room a few minutes later, and I'll never forget the look on his face. He said, "It looks like someone's been living down there." I felt my stomach drop. Apparently, the insulation was pushed aside. There were food wrappers, a thin blanket, and this part still messes me up. Tally marks scratched into the wood along the walls inside. They didn't say how many. I didn't ask. I didn't want to know if he was counting days, or me. All I knew was that we needed to get out of that apartment fast. My mom broke the lease. We packed everything in a weekend and were gone by Monday. They never officially caught him. A few weeks later, police picked up a homeless guy near an abandoned shopping plaza a few miles away. He kind of matched the description. Same rough build, same tired eyes, but he didn't say much, and honestly I don't think the cops pushed very hard. They seemed to think maybe he'd overheard my name through the walls. Maybe he'd been living there longer than we realized. Like that explained everything. But the part that still keeps me up at night, that Geetha one in my closet, he said my name like he knew me, not like someone who overheard it, like an old friend. Since then, I still see him sometimes, not fully, not clearly. Just flashes in my mind, and a smile, lips silently mouthing she. It's distorted now, blurry with time, but the feeling never left. He's the reason I can't walk past a half-open door without getting nauseous. The reason I always check closets every time, no matter how safe the place is. And yeah, turns out we didn't have rats after all. Last year, I picked up a new gig at an amusement park, not directly with the park itself, but through this local artsy vendor company. They ran this quirky photo booth inside the fairgrounds. You know, the kind dress up in vintage costumes, stand in front of an old-timey backdrop, snap some sepia-toned pictures. I was 18 then, one of the older people on the team. Most of my co-workers were still juggling high school. The job was actually fun. Help guests pick out outfits, pose them, maybe toss them a cowboy hat or a feather boa. Everyone was smiling, laughing. It felt normal again. We kicked things off in the spring, and by the time summer rolled in ... That summer, I was working full-time hours during the week. Most of the crew only came in on weekends. So on weekdays, it was just me alone in the booth. For hours at a time. It got quiet. Too quiet sometimes. To keep myself from going stir-crazy, I'd occasionally wander across the path to chat with a co-worker at one of the other kiosks. Just a few minutes of small talk helped break the silence, and that's when I first noticed him. This one guy, he'd pass by the booth slowly. I mean really slowly. Like he was moving through molasses. Eyes locked on me the entire time. Not blinking. Not looking around. Just ... staring. At first I figured maybe he was just awkward, nervous, maybe. People get weird when they're trying to approach someone, especially in a busy place like an amusement park. But there was something about the way he looked at me. Something cold. It wasn't curiosity. It was ... fixation. Still, I shrugged it off. After all, it's a public place. He hadn't done anything wrong, just weird. Then one day I made a mistake. I smiled and gave him a little wave, thinking maybe it would ease the tension, break the ice. Bad call. He rushed over immediately. Like immediately, and just stood there in front of the booth, not saying anything at first, just staring. I tried to keep it professional. I gave him the usual rundown about photo prices and package deals, all while trying to ignore the crawling feeling working its way up my spine. And then he smiled. It wasn't awkward, it wasn't shy, it was ... wrong, like his skin didn't quite fit right, like his face was imitating what a smile was supposed to look like. Then he leaned in way too close and asked, "How much would it be?" For me his tone was strange, not playful, not joking, just ... off, like he thought the normal rules didn't apply to him. I politely told him that discounts were for employees only. He didn't argue, just gave this slow twitchy nod, then slinked off without another word. Right then, a family walked up to the booth, and I was so grateful for the distraction I practically dragged them inside. I focused on helping the kids into costumes and posing them for photos, anything to forget about the guy. But while I was wrapping up with the family, I glanced toward the fence. He was there again, standing just outside the little chain that bordered our shop area, watching still. When the family left, he tried to follow them into the photo area. I stepped in front of him and said, as firmly as I could, "Sorry, sir. We only let in paying customers." He didn't get angry, but the way he looked at me in that moment, it was like I'd broken some secret rule only he understood. Like I'd disappointed him. He looked annoyed, but eventually walked away. I thought hope that would be the end of it, but I was so wrong. As the week went on, it got worse every day. I'd see him, he'd lurk across the path, hiding behind the corner of a game booth, peeking out just enough to keep me in his line of sight, watching, waiting, always staring. I tried to act like I didn't notice. Figured maybe if I ignored him, he'd get bored and move on. But it had the opposite effect. He got bolder by Friday. Things hit a breaking point. The park had just opened for the day. I was outside early, setting up props and fixing the little costume rack. That's when I saw him. He wasn't hiding this time, he was walking straight toward me, deliberate, eyes locked. That same eerie focus. My stomach flipped. I dropped everything, props hit the floor, and I darted back into the booth, slamming the gate shut behind me. I clipped the chain in place with shaking hands. He stood right outside, pacing, muttering to himself every so often. He'd glance at me, those wide, twitchy eyes, and that same horrible smile twisted across his face. It didn't look human. It looked stretched, artificial. I was on the verge of grabbing the phone to call security when, without warning, he lunged. Both hands gripped the chain like he was going to rip it down. His eyes were wild. His body was trembling, and then he started whispering ... The things he said, they were sick ... Sexual, violent, unhinged. He kept repeating that he loved me, that he wanted me to dress him up. Said he wanted me to humiliate him in front of people. Said he'd been watching me all week because I understood him. It was like something from a nightmare you can't wake up from. I was frozen near the back of the booth, trying to stay calm, trying not to cry. Finally, I found my voice and yelled at him, "Leave now or I'm calling security." That's when he said it. Something I'll never forget. He looked me dead in the eye and whispered, "Meet me at the employee exit when you're off, or else." Then he just turned and walked away like he hadn't just threatened me, like it was a perfectly normal request. The moment he was out of sight, I broke down, full on sobbing, shaking. I'd never been that terrified in my life. Later, when I told my manager what had happened, his face went pale. He couldn't believe I hadn't spoken up sooner that night. They had security escort me out the back. The next morning I had a meeting with the park's security team. I gave them a full description and every detail I could remember. I was barely 5 minutes back at the booth when ... Later that day, I returned to my booth with 2 coworkers, and wouldn't you know it, he showed up again. But this time, his face was different. Angry, like really pissed off, the kind of expression that made the hairs on my arms stand up. I immediately ducked into the back of the booth and finally told my coworkers everything that had been going on. They didn't leave my side after that. Not during the shift. Not even after their hours were up. They stayed with me the whole time. Like human shields. Security took it seriously now. At first, they had uniformed guards posted nearby just in case. But the second he caught sight of one, he'd vanish like clockwork. Like he knew how to disappear when it counted, so they changed tactics. Instead of uniforms, they had a plainclothes officer pose as a customer at a kiosk across from mine. I felt like bait, but honestly, I didn't even care anymore. I just wanted him gone. And finally, it worked. He showed up again, walking straight toward me with that same dead-eyed stare. But this time, they got him. The officer moved fast, grabbed him before he even reached the booth. He didn't resist. He just went quiet. I couldn't even hold it together. The adrenaline broke, and I started crying right there in front of everyone, as the officer tried to reassure me that I was safe. Turns out, he had a park membership. That's how he'd been getting in so easily. They revoked it immediately and banned him from every Six Flags park in the country. But here's the part that still makes my stomach turn. Since he hadn't physically attacked me, they had to let him go. No charges stuck. Just like that, he was back on the street that night. On my drive home, I saw him walking along the side of the road, like nothing had happened, like he was just a guy taking a stroll. I hit the gas so hard I probably broke half a dozen traffic laws. I just needed to get away. I was convinced he might follow me home. 4 days after I barely slept, a few weeks later, a friend of mine who worked in park security reached out, said the guy had been arrested in a nearby town, charged with public indecency, and a few other things they didn't want to say out loud over the phone. I looked up the records. It was him. Now I know this. The story might not sound as dramatic as some of the horror tales you hear online. There's no ghost, no demon, no haunted mirror. But for me, that week was a waking nightmare. It reminded me how thin the line is between creepy and dangerous, between unsettling and something truly sinister. So yeah, ... If there's anything I learned from that experience, never ignore your gut. Tell someone the moment things feel off, and pay attention to who is hanging around Devon in broad daylight, even in public places. Because sometimes the scariest monsters don't hide under beds. They buy a season pass and wait by your booth. I was with my Boy Scout troop on one of our usual weekend camping trips. This time, we were out near Clinton Lake in Kansas. I'd been on a bunch of these campouts before, but this one, it was the last one I clearly remember before my family moved to a different state. We rolled in on a cold, rainy Friday evening, the kind of drizzle that seeps into your jacket and makes setting up tents an absolute nightmare. But the next morning, perfect. Clear skies, sunshine, birdsong, classic Midwest hiking weather right before we headed out for our day hike. This beat-up old van pulled into the site next to ours. It looked like something straight out of a 1970s road trip movie. A bunch of guys climbed out, totally leaning into the hippie vibe, tie-dye shirts, long hair, bare feet, bongos, and the unmistakable smell of something that was definitely not wood smoke. A couple of us joked about a skunk being nearby. The adults just exchanged looks and chuckled, but one of them, I think our scout leader, walked over to have a quick word with them, probably to tell them to chill out with the drugs around a bunch of middle schoolers. We left for our hike and came back a few hours later. They were still there. Still completely out of it. They were trying to play music, but it sounded awful, like they were too high to even strum properly. And then, as the sun started to go down, things got weird. Gone with the tie-dye shirts and laid-back drum circles. They changed. Now they looked like they'd stepped out of a Marilyn Manson music video. Trench coats, pale makeup, jet black clothing, eyeliner, and all the sloppy bongo rhythms were replaced with loud grunge metal blaring from somewhere in their sight. I couldn't see a speaker, but the sound was massive, echoing through the trees like a war cry. Their whole energy had shifted from goofy stoners to something a lot darker that night. After dinner, we decided to play a game of capture the flag. In a big open field not far from where their site was set up, we made it extra fun by not using flashlights, sneaking around in the dark to avoid giving away our positions, which also meant ... we couldn't really see what was going on around us from where we were playing. The angle gave us a clearer view of their campsite, and that's when we realized the music had changed again. Gone was the grunge metal. Now, something else echoed through the woods. It was eerie, dramatic opera music, loud and distorted, drifting through the trees like a soundtrack to something you shouldn't be watching. Curious, I crept closer. Not all the way to their camp, just enough to get a better look from behind a tree. That's when I saw it. Their campfire, if you could still call it that, had turned into a massive blaze, way beyond what any campground fire rules would ever allow. It looked uncontrolled, dangerous. And then I saw something hanging from a branch. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Maybe it was some weird prop or part of their trippy ritual. Maybe I was just seeing things in the firelight. I told myself not to be dramatic and went back to the game. We only played for a little while longer before the troop leaders called it off and told us to get ready for bed. But that night, things took a serious turn. Sometime in the middle of the night, our troop leaders woke us up, quiet but urgent. They told us to pack up immediately. No questions, no delays. Every adult looked on edge. Their voices were sharp and serious. You could feel it in the air. This wasn't a drill or some weather-related evacuation. They were scared. We tore down the tents in record time, trying to be quiet even though we didn't understand what was going on as we loaded up the bus. I looked toward the goth campers' site one last time. The bonfire was still burning high and wild, but the music was gone instead. We heard voices, low, uneven, like chanting. Not talking, not laughing, just this strange quiet murmuring floating through the night air. I couldn't make out a single word, but something about it made my skin crawl. Once we were all on the bus, no one said a word. The troop leaders sat near the front, looking pale and tight, jawed. The rest of us whispered in the back, trying to make sense of what just happened. That's when one of the other guys he'd been on the opposite capture that flag team pulled me aside. He told me he'd also snuck over to that camp during the game, only he got closer than I did. What he saw, I still wish he hadn't told me. Hanging from the tree was what looked like a dead dog, its head cut off, and next to it, 2 human legs severed at the thigh. He swore they were real. Said he saw the blood. Said the smell made him gag after that. It all made sense why the adults rushed us out so fast, why nobody explained anything, why there were no questions allowed. We never found out what really happened that night. None of the leaders ever brought it up again. Not a single follow-up, no police visits, no news stories, just silence. But I've never forgotten it. Not the fire, not the chanting, not those pale figures in trench coats standing around like a cult waiting for something. And I haven't camped anywhere near Clinton Lake since not once. It was the summer after 5th grade. My mom, grandma, and I had spent the morning hitting up garage sales in a nearby Kansas town. It was kind of a weekend ritual we did whenever the weather was nice, driving around, stopping wherever we saw signs or balloons, just browsing for bargains. Most of the sales were pretty typical. Old kitchen gadgets, worn-out books, broken lamps, a few cool vintage things here and there. Nothing too exciting, but enough to make it fun. By the end of the day, we ended up in this quiet residential area on the edge of town. It was the kind of place with copy-paste houses, freshly mowed lawns, and those little American flags stuck in garden beds. Mostly older folks lived there, retirees with ceramic frogs and lawn gnomes guarding their porches. My mom and grandma started chatting with a woman selling stuff a few houses down, so I wandered ahead on my own. There was a house with its garage door open. A few folding tables were laid out with random items. No sign, no balloons, nothing flashy. but there was a man sitting in a lawn chair near the back of the garage, so I figured it was fair game. Looked like a garage sale to me. I walked in cautiously, just browsing. Everything looked like leftovers from someone cleaning out a spare bedroom, an old toaster, a few scratchy throw blankets, racks of oversized women's clothing. No toys, no tools, nothing that screamed kid-friendly. Oddly, there were no signs that a man lived there at all. Still, I figured maybe he was just helping someone else run the sale. The man looked to be in his early 40s. He had a weird energy, something I couldn't quite place at the time, but that stuck with me later. Thinning hair around the temples, a thick mustache, and one of those faded wolf t-shirts. He wore short jean shorts, the kind that hadn't been in style since the 90s. He kept shifting around in his chair, crossing and uncrossing his legs, like he couldn't get comfortable. He didn't say anything at first, just kept smiling. Little too long. One of the tables had a huge plastic bin filled with old dolls, mostly naked Barbies, arms twisted, hair wild. I crouched down out of curiosity almost immediately. I regretted it. The doll's hair was stiff and sticky, coated in a weird residue like someone had dumped glue or some kind of gunk on them. It wasn't just gross, it was wrong, and the smell, it hit me like a wall. Sour, musty, like something had gone bad and never got cleaned up. Not garbage bad rot bad. It made my stomach twist while I was still crouched near the bin. The guy finally spoke. He asked how old I was, where I went to school, then he asked if I liked Barbies. His tone was strange, too familiar, like he wasn't really asking about dolls. I mumbled something like, just looking, and started inching toward the garage exit. That's when he started talking about his dog, a cocker spaniel, he said. And right on cue, we heard scratching. Behind the inside garage door. He opened it, and the dog stepped out. But the moment it saw him, it growled. Not a nervous bark, not a warning growl, a full-on low, throaty snarl like it was looking at a stranger or a threat. Then it bolted, took off around the house like it wanted nothing to do with him. I remember thinking, if a dog acts like that toward its own owner, something's seriously wrong. That was my breaking point. I told him I was leaving. He sounded a little disappointed, said, already. But I gave a quick wave and walked away fast without looking back. I caught up with my mom and grandma a couple houses down. I didn't say much, just mumbled something about the stuff being junky and not worth checking out for a while. I honestly thought maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe I let my imagination get ahead of me. I was just a kid, after all. But about a week later, everything changed. We were watching the evening news when a story came on that made my stomach drop. Police had arrested a man for breaking into a woman's house, dressing in her clothes and attacking someone inside. But that wasn't the weirdest part. The man had apparently held a garage sale at the victim's house while it was all happening the whole time. He was literally running a sale while there was a crime scene inside. And guess where it happened? That same quiet neighborhood. Can't say for sure if it was the same house. Maybe it wasn't. But I remember that weird smile, the dog's reaction, the smell coming off those dolls like death in plastic form. And now I trust those instincts a little more, because looking back, I think I came way too close to something terrible.